and welcome to this video tutorial where I'm going to be showing you how to create a sewing pattern quickly and easily for a pair of trousers. And the beauty of what I'm going to be sharing with you today and how I share everything in my world is that I'm going to be sharing with you not just how to do this, but also why you are doing what you're doing. This means that you can then adapt everything I'm sharing with you to work for your dream clothing ideas. So you'll be able to create a waistband height that works for you. You'll be able to change how flared the trousers are. You'll be able to change the length of them. You'll be able to change the side shaping of the seam on the side of the trousers. So my aim is that you're not just copying what I'm creating, you're creating clothes that you actually want to wear. And in case you're new around here, my name is Sarah and I am here to help you create those clothes that make you feel good, that give you an extra spring in your step. And that means creating clothes with two different aspects really considered. And that means, first of all, making sure your clothes fit to perfection. No one wants to wear clothes that don't fit really, really nicely. And second of all, making sure those designs feel like you. They give you that extra layer of confidence. They give you that extra spring in your step. So that means we have to get clear on what your unique style is. And then we also have to be able to draft our own sewing patterns to create those designs and bring them to life. So what you're going to find in my world is I really focus on three core areas. First of all, fitting mastery. Secondly, drafting mastery. And third of all, really discovering what your unique style is so you get to express yourself through clothes and have an extra layer of confidence as you wear those dream garments. To be able to draft your own sewing patterns, there are various different tools you need. Now, I'm not going to go over the specifics of every single tool because I have another video on that where I show you everything you need to know to start drafting your own sewing patterns. But I'm just going to give you the quick list of tools, which I'll pop below as well, so that you can start drafting your pattern with me today. So first of all, you need a propelling pencil and a rubber to go with that. You also need sticky tape that you can draw on, some paper scissors, a tape measure, pattern cutting paper. Now, if you don't have a huge roll of pattern cutting official paper, then I recommend the rolls of paper from IKEA. They're really, really good, and it means you're not sticking lots of pieces of paper together. And then your rulers. So a little short ruler can be really, really helpful. A longer ruler can be helpful, but we also want to make sure we have this one essential piece of pattern drafting equipment, which is our pattern cutting ruler. Now, I'm going to be showing you how to use this during this tutorial, but the main thing you want to make sure with your pattern cutting ruler is you've got this 90-degree line and you've got these increment lines here, because these are going to help you really speed up that pattern drafting process. Now, as well as the tools, you're going to want to have some pattern cutting blocks. These are going to speed up the process 100 times over because they do the hard work for you. These are the blocks we're going to be using today, the trouser front and back block. These are half scale, in case you're wondering why they're so small. This is firstly because I can fit this on the screen to show you how to go about this tutorial. And secondly, they're really, really good for practicing your drafting techniques and seeing your pattern come to life and then testing it in a small toile so that you can really test the proportions before you waste lots of material and find that it's not how you want. So these I have included in a free sample set that is also linked below. You'll be able to print out that sample set in either A4 paper or US letter size paper, so whatever works for you. And then all you need to do is stick together your trouser blocks, and if you're going to use your sleeve blocks, then you can stick that together as well. So you'll find the bodice blocks, the sleeve block, and the trouser block, so you'll be able to start drafting straight away. So that we can make this pattern as easily and smoothly as possible, what we want to do is get super clear on what the design is, because obviously with the world of pattern cutting, we have unlimited choices. So we want to know exactly what we're creating so that we're not going around in circles when we're creating the pattern and playing a guessing game. So what I do first of all is I gather my inspiration. That might be thoughts in my head, it might be ideas that I've seen in stores, it might be ideas off Pinterest, because I find rarely am I literally copying one design, because there's always something that we're like, I just want to tweak this or add this to suit either our style or our lifestyle. So then what I do once I've gathered the inspiration, and I'll write down little notes and thoughts somewhere, is I will get super clear on what my design is by drawing it. And I am no fashion illustrator, I will be first to admit that. So it literally can be a quick scribble. The one thing you want to bear in mind though is you want to make sure you've thought about your front and your back. You can draw half of each if it's a symmetrical design. If it's asymmetrical, you obviously want to draw the whole thing. The other thing you want to consider is how you are going to get into the garment. Very often this can be missed, and this is something I'm always reminding my students to always think, how are you actually going to get that on? So I'll normally mark that on my little scribble where I've written on here, I'm going to do an invisible zip. So as I've been drawing out this idea, what I've thought is, how wide do I want the waistband to be? How long do I want the legs to be? Do I want them to come to the floor, or do I want them to be higher up? How wide do I want the legs to be? Do I still want to have darts in my pattern? And how am I getting it on? So it really gives you that opportunity to really think things through as you are drawing your design. Now, once you've drawn up your design, what you want to do is create what I call a pattern cutting to-do list. And this is an absolute game changer for you not finding that when you're halfway through drawing your pattern, you're finding you should have done something 4 steps ago. That then means you have to go back and you basically turn it into a paper mache mess because so many things are restuck, cut again, and stuck in different ways. So I really, really recommend this, and I get all my students doing this so they're not going round in circles. And it literally looks like something like this, where it's literally a checklist of like, you do this first, then this, then this, then this, then this. This gives you a chance to cross things out, change them before you go about drafting your pattern. So to go about creating that to-do list, what we're doing is we're literally playing spot the difference with our blocks, because as I said before, these are your templates to creating your sewing patterns. So we basically want to work out what is different between these and the design we have drawn up. So that means playing spot the difference. So let me go through this to-do list with you. So this is going to make a lot more sense, and then you can really get a feel as to what order we want to do things in as you're creating your own sewing patterns. So what I recommend doing is always starting in the middle of the body. So that tummy, that bust area. And for trousers, that means that tummy area. So what we're going to be looking at is what needs to change in this area. Does the crotch need to change? Does the height of where it comes underneath the crotch area need to change? Do the darts need to change? Does the waistline height need to change? Does the shape of the hip need to change? What needs to change in this area first? And then we're working our way down and away from that middle area of the body, all the way down to the hemline last. And one thing to really consider when you are going about creating this to-do list and then drafting that pattern is, if you're changing something on the front, does it also need to change on the back so that either it matches up in terms of seam lines or it balances out the garment? And as we create this, you're going to get a real idea as to what I mean about balances out the garment, as well as reflects the same seam edges as well. With this design, I have decided I don't want to have any darts on the back area. So we are wanting to get rid of these darts. However, we don't want to just like cut off the side here, because you're going to find the shaping and the way the fabric sits on the body just isn't very nice. So what we want to do instead is actually 2 birds 1 stone with this. And what we can do is close up this dart, but then open it up at the bottom in the leg here, so we're still honoring that dart, and that fabric we're pinching out is then actually going to go into volume and help create that flare. So we can do that on both the front and the back. So these darts are going to pivot into the hemlines, so we're creating that volume. So this is what we want to write first of all on our to-do list. I always tend to look at the darts first because I find they can get in the way of our designs. So looking at those darts and where you want them to go first, or how you want them to incorporate them into your designs, is going to help you make them work for your creations. So the first thing, pivot darts, front and back to hem. And like I said, we're looking at the front and the back together. So that we've got that balance and the same thing is happening front and back, we're going to pivot them both to the hemlines. However, when we look at that balance now, we have pivoted 2 darts on the back, but only 1 on the front to the hemline. So there's going to be 2 extra sections of volume added to the back, but not the front, only 1 added to the front. So we then want to balance that out. So that means opening up the front with an extra wedge of volume added in, so that these are going to balance out. So that creates our second thing we want to do. So open up front for flare. Okay, and then from that we want to then look, is there anything else in this area that wants to change? Do we want to change the crotch? No, that's pretty good for the design we're creating. Do we want to change the waistline? Yes. So I'm going to add a waistband to my design. So as you saw here, there's a little waistband, and that means I want to then lower this slightly so that then my waistband is going to sit centrally on this line. So I want to establish how wide I want the waistband to be, and then the middle of the waistband is going to sit on this waist height. So I'm going to lower the waistband slightly. Lower waistband. Then what I'm going to do is create a waistband, because I don't have one. So I'm going to create waistband that will then create this waistband I've drawn. So then I could even add belt hoops on it like I've got on this one. But I think for now I'm just going to leave it plain, so there's no need for a belt like it would be on this, but you could add hoops on there as well. And then what we want to think is, what else needs to change in this area? Is there anything around the hip area? We already spoke about the crotch, we spoke about this waistline, and now we want to consider the hips. So with the hips, yes, we want to add in an invisible zip to be able to get in there. So we want to mark on that zip, so we know how we're going to get into the garment. And then the other thing that we want to change with the hip line, now this is optional, but this is my personal preference, is that currently this is shaping inwards. So this has a shape inwards, and we can tell that because the hip line is like this. If I was to line my ruler up with the hip line, which is currently horizontal, my ruler actually has a little bit of a gap down there. So this is coming in, and I don't want it to do that with this flared example. So I'm going to straighten that. So then the flare is going to come out straight. So that's the other thing I'm going to change, which is the side seam shaping. And that's it. That is our to-do list right there. So now what we want to do is draft our pair of trousers by simply going through these steps to be able to then create our pattern. Then the last thing we're going to do after that is add on our hem and seam allowances, which is what we do with every single pattern. So I'll just write HA for hem allowance and SA for seam allowance, and we'll also be doing annotations. So this is our to-do list, super simple, super quick, and now we're going to know exactly what to do rather than go around in circles. We've got clear on our design and we have our pattern cutting to-do list. So now it's definitely time to draft that pattern. So step 1 is pivoting darts front and back to the hem. So let's start with the front, and you need to grab yourself a couple of sheets of paper which have more than enough room around your blocks so that we can pivot things. We're going to be adding quite a lot of volume to these trousers, so you want to make sure you've got quite a bit of extra paper. The more volume you're adding, the more paper you're going to want to have, and you always want to make sure you've got extra around the edge for your hem and seam allowances. So you want to have this kind of space around there. Okay, so step 1, pivoting this dart into the hem line. The first thing we want to do is just draw down from this dart. You can just do it with your finger and just mark a little point in pencil on the bottom of your trouser block. Now we can rub this out later. You don't want to edit or change these in any way, shape or form, but just doing a little pencil line as a reference line and then rubbing it out later, that is perfectly okay. Now, because I know I'm going to pivot my block this way and then this way to add in extra volume, I want to have extra paper this side. Now, if you're not sure where your extra paper is going to be needed, just do it in the middle so you're not forever cutting and sticking and adding on extra paper. So then what we're going to do is we're going to draw around just part of our block so that we can then pivot this dart closed to still honor it and move that extra volume to the bottom. So you're going to start by just drawing this side of your dart and then carry on going around the rest of your trouser block until you get to that little pencil line you've already drawn. Now what we're going to do is literally put your pencil here and then pivot your block until the other side of that dart reaches the side that you've just drawn. And that is you closing up that dart. I'm getting in the way here because I'm trying not to get my head in the camera, so I'm just going to shift that over. So it lines up with the side of the dart you've already drawn. Now what you want to do is draw around the rest of the block that you've not drawn around up until that point, and then again just mark where that point comes to. Now whilst we're at this stage, what is really handy is for you to mark on where these reference lines are, because you'll find them useful later on. So just mark on where that knee reference line is, just do a dot either side, and then the same with the hip line, a dot either side. And you'll notice that I am using pens here. Please don't use pens, use pencil so that you can rub things out. I'm just doing it so you can see it on the screen. So now what we've got is this, and we've got this gap here. This is our dart opened up at the bottom, but what we can do rather than marking in a new dart down here is we can use this as extra volume for our flare. So just join this up at the bottom to finish the bottom of our trousers there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the back and close up those darts on the back as the rest of part of step 1 on our to-do list. So again, because I know I'm going to be adding extra volume this way, I'm going to pivot my block this way. I'm going to place this crotch area nearer to the edge of the paper up here and have more paper this side. Now we're going to do the same process, just the difference is we have 2 darts rather than 1. So you're going to want to just imaginary draw down from those darts and then mark 2 little pencil lines at the bottom here to mark where these will open up in a minute. Then what we're going to do is do the exact same process. We're going to start by just drawing along that first edge of the dart, only that one side, carrying on drawing round our block up to that first point, and then just do a little mark where that first point is. Then we're going to pivot that block so then the other side of the dart just matches where that dart comes to, and then we're literally going to draw just the middle section, so just that top waist bit there in the middle and just this side of the dart, and then we're going to do the same, just the middle bit in between those 2 little reference pencil points you've done there and the middle bit of the trouser there. Now again, this is really handy at this point to mark on where those reference lines come. So just do a dot either side of the hip line and the knee line. You'll thank me later for those ones. And then we're going to carry on and pivot, close that dart at the top again. So just pivot your block until the edge of the dart meets the side you've already drawn, and then carry on drawing around the rest of the block, that you have not drawn around up until that little pencil reference line. So then you'll see we've opened up these sections at the bottom. We could turn them into darts So they join from here to here and here to here, but we want extra volume. We want that flare. So we can join this all up and it's two birds, one stone. We've got no darts at the top and we've created that flare at the bottom. So we're just going to join these up like so. So as you can see now, these have opened up a lot more. This back side is opened up a lot more than the front side because we've added in those two extra volume sections by just getting rid of our darts and turning them into that volume. So what we want to do to make sure our trousers balance nicely and we have a similar flare on the front is we want to open up the pattern in a second place. So it's very, very similar process to opening up the pattern for the dart. The only difference is we're not going to be turning a dart into this extra volume. We're just going to be opening and pivoting open the pattern from the top here. So let me show you a little trick to be able to do this so you're not cutting, sticking, going around in circles. So you want to again just grab your pattern cutting block, your front one, and then we just want to mark on a few reference points first. So first of all, you want to find your midpoint in between your dart and your side seam. So just grab your ruler, mark that midpoint on to your pattern. So for me, that's 2.2, like so. And then we're just gonna, again, just imaginary draw down from that, going down to your hemline. Mark a little pencil point on your block and on your pattern. And then we're going to go through the same process. So we're basically pivoting our block as if we had a dart, but we don't have a dart. We're just pivoting from the top. So put your nail there. I find putting my nail there works really well. And then we're literally going to pivot this like this. And so that we know how much to pivot it by, we want to measure what the gap was on our original, on our other opening. So whatever was between these 2 points, we're going to open up our pattern by the same amount. So for me, that is 8.5. So I'm going to place my ruler here at 8.5. And then we can just move our ruler until it hits this point when we're pivoting this. Place your block back where it was. Put your finger at that pivot point at the top and then move this until this pencil mark you just did hits that 8.5 centimeter mark. You might need to move your ruler slightly just so it's in the right place. And then we're gonna trace around the rest of the block. And this will add in our other second section of volume to create that really, really nice flare. Okay, and then we're just going to join that up like so. There we go. So now we have a front and a back, and the flare looks like a very, very similar width. It doesn't need to be the exact same width because generally a back trouser will be slightly wider than a front trouser, but it's going to honor the balance a lot better than what we had before. Okay, so we've done 1, we've done 2, opening up that front with the extra flare, and now we're on to 3, lowering the waistband. So first thing we want to do before we start lowering that waistband is to decide how wide we want the waistband to be. Now we're going for a straight waistband, so you don't want it to be super wide. If it was super wide, you would need to go for a curved one so it curves around the body. So I recommend around a 2.5 to 4 centimeter width waistband in full scale. I'm going to do mine 4 centimeters, which means 2 centimeters in half scale. And what you can do to establish how wide you want your waistband to be is simply just go and look at some of your pairs of trousers and think, which ones do I like the most? Do I prefer it wider? Do I prefer it narrower? See what works for you. So I'm going to do a 2 centimeter wide waistband in half scale. So what that means is I want to lower this waistband, so my lower this waistline, so that my waistband is going to sit in the middle of it. So my waistband will be over here. So then this waistline will sit in the middle of it. So that means I want to lower this by half the measurement of my waistband, which for me is 1 centimeter. Then what I'm going to do is get my pattern cutting ruler, and this is where the increment lines come in really, really handy. I'm going to line up my 1 centimeter increment line with my original waistline, and I'm just going to follow the edge of my pattern to lower that waistline. Like so. And now what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of this here. And then I'm going to do the same on the back. So I'm going to line up my 1 centimeter increment lines, follow the pattern, just move your ruler so that it's always lined up with the edge, and you can do as many little sections as you want. Just make sure it's really nice and smooth around there. And then we're going to scribble this out. So that is my waist lowered. Now the next thing we want to do is create that waistband. So find yourself a piece of pattern paper that is going to be fairly long and also enough space for you to add those seam and hem allowances on later on as well. Now we want to make sure we're not doing things really close to other patterns because you're going to add those seam and hem allowances later. So always make sure you've got space around things. You'll find otherwise you're forever sticking pieces of paper together. So I'm going to draw my waistband over here. And I'm going to start by just drawing a long line like so. Then I know the waistband I'm doing is 2 centimeters wide. So I'm going to line up that 2 centimeter wide, that 2 centimeter increment line with that original line I've just done. And then I'm going to literally draw a line parallel like so. Now I want this waistband so it folds back on itself. I'm not going to have a seam at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the other side of it, and that means literally drawing another 2 centimeter line parallel. So I'm going to line up that 2 centimeter line and draw another line like so. Now the length is what we then need to establish. So I'm going to start by just drawing one end of it. And I know that I want my zip to be at the side. So what I'm going to have then is a front part of the waistband, another front part of the waistband, then a back, then the back. So I'm just going to mark on here FF back, back. And then what I want to do is measure what's going to be the width of each of the front and the back sections. So we're going to go to our front and back trouser pattern pieces, and then we're going to grab a tape measure, and then what you can do is place that tape measure vertically so you can measure around the curve really, really easily, and just keep measuring until you get to the edge. Make sure you are not measuring the original line, which is why it's really handy to rub things out so you know what line you're working with. So for me that is 8.6 for my front. Let's write on here front. There we go. So front was 8.6. So this is going to be 8.6, 8.6. And we know this is going to be a zip, so let's mark that on there with a zip and then an arrow up and down, which indicates where it'll be. And then we want to see our back and how long our waistline is there. 8.8. So this is 8.8, 8.8. Okay, and then we're simply going to mark along this line. So I find it really, really handy to make sure I'm using this knot, and then I've got an 8.6 this side and 8.6 this side. It just means I'm not using my ruler as much, but you'll find you get into the swing of that as you're using your ruler more and more. You'll find quicker ways to use it. So then we've got 8.8, 8.8. And then 8.8. All right, I got a bit overzealous thinking we could have it even longer. So what this means now is we've got really nice notch points. So you know this is going to match up at your center front, this is going to match up at your other side seam, this is going to match up at your center back, and then back to your side seam. And this is where the length of our waistband will finish. So this is our side seam, and then we can literally write on here, this is going to be the center back, this is going to be the center front. So it creates really nice reference points that we can then add notches to later on, so you can line this up really, really nicely. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do is mark on that zip. So first of all, you need to decide how long you want that zip to be. The more volume you have in a garment, generally the shorter the zip you can get away with, and we have quite a lot of volume in our garment. So I would suggest maybe a 15 centimeter or 20 centimeter invisible zip in your trousers. So what we want to do then is mark down our side seam where that is going to finish, and that will then be a notch point on our pattern. Now, because we have a waistband, we obviously want to include this amount here in our zip length. So we want to be making sure we're bearing in mind that we're going to have a waistband which is this long, and then we want to continue the rest of the measurement needed for the zip down here. So if I did a 20 centimeter invisible zip, that would mean 10 centimeters in half scale. This is 2 centimeters, so I want to mark down 8 centimeters down my side seam where that zip is going to finish. So I'm just going to get my ruler again, place it vertical, and then mark a little point at 8 centimeters, which is going to be where the zip is going to be. And then I can write on here zip. I'm writing at a very strange angle, but you can see what I'm doing there. And then I'm going to do it on the front as well, on the back, sorry, as well. So let's just shuffle this all over, grab this, and then we're going to do it on this back too. So then we're doing zip. Now, because you're going to only want the zip one side, decide which side you would rather have it on, and just note that on the pattern. I prefer to have it on the right hand side, so I just write RHS, right hand side. That's normal, a normal abbreviation, not just in pattern cutting, but in life for right hand side. So right hand side only. Cool, okay. And then the next thing we want to do is that side seam shaping. So to do that, we're going to need a little bit of a reference point. So what I recommend doing is we're going to start with our front trousers. What we want to do to shape this side seam, because at the moment it's not going out straight, it is going a little bit inwards, and I want it to go straight, so we add in even extra flat. So pop your pattern cutting block back on top, and then what we're going to do is use our 90-degree line, place that along our hip line, and then just shuffle it out until it meets the widest area, the part of the hip that sticks out the most. And then we're literally going to draw a line down from there, so it's coming at 90 degrees to that hip reference line. So you'll see now it's actually just a little bit further out than what the trouser was before, because it was curving in slightly. And then we can just do that all the way down, and then just join up your hemline. So grab your 90-degree line again, line that up, and then join that back in. So we've done the front, this line can now be ignored, and now we want to do the back. So let's just put this to one side, and we're going to do the same with the back. So put your block on top, line your 90-degree line up with the hip line, bring it out until it meets the widest part of the hip, which is up here, and then we're just going to continue this line all the way down. So we've got that beautiful wide flare, and then just line up your 90-degree line again and join the rest of your trousers together like so. So now we have that side seam shaping that's going straight down rather than curving in a bit. Now the next thing we want to do is add our hem and seam allowances and then any annotations. We want to add hem and seam allowances now because there are no hem and seam allowances added to our blocks. You'd find that you'd just be going around in circles, they'd get in your way all the time and you'd end up basically redoing them if they were added to the blocks. So no blocks ever include your hem and seam allowances. This at the moment is the finished fabric side. So what I find really, really helpful to be able to add your hem and seam allowances without making mistakes, because I find sometimes I go into autopilot and I'm there just adding 1 centimeter all the way around and then I realize I should have done a 0.5 or a 2 centimeter hem allowance or something. What I find really, really helpful is just writing on each edge how much wants to be added. So let's start with this back because we've got this piece first. We want to think what is going to be a seam and what's going to be a hem. The only hem we're going to have is down here. So let's start with this. And generally what I recommend doing is a 1.5 to 2 centimeter hem. So in half scale, that would be a 0.75 to 1 centimeter hem. To make it really easy, I'm just going to write 1 centimeter here. Now, one thing I would say though, is when you are sewing up your toiles, you don't need to add your hem allowances when they're in half scale and in full scale. You only need to do it with the finished garment or if you're testing something out. So generally I won't bother doing them, but so that you can really understand the process, we are going to add these today. So we're doing 1 centimeter hem allowance on our hems. So let's grab our front as well. And then the rest are going to be seam allowances. Generally what I recommend is a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance for the kind of fabric I'd be using for this. Obviously if you're doing French seams, you'd want to do bigger seam allowances. So you want to have a little look as to what seams you want to do to create these. But generally what I recommend is a 1 centimeter seam allowance if you are just doing a normal seam that is maybe overlocked or zigzag stitch afterwards. So that means in half scale, they're going to be 0.5 centimeters wide, because they're half of that full amount. So I'm just going to go around all of this like so. And then the last thing we want to do is that waistband. So everything's going to be a seam, so it's all going to be 0.5, like so. So then all you're going to do then is literally add on your hems and seam allowances. So you're going to get your ruler. Let's just move that out of the way. You're going to get your ruler and you're going to use these increment lines. This is where your pattern cutting ruler really, really speeds up the process than just using a normal ruler, because you're not there going around being like 1 centimeter, 1, 1, 1, 1. You're literally going to line up your ruler and just follow the edge of the pattern, making sure you're doing the amounts we've written around the edge on every single edge. So once you have added all of your hem and seam allowances on every single pattern, including your waistband, and adding that seam allowance all the way around, you then want to cut out on your pattern pieces so they look like something like this. Now, you may notice they look a bit bare and we don't really have an idea of necessarily how they are going to go together. So what we want to do is annotate our sewing patterns so that we know exactly how they're going to go together when we sew them up, because obviously we don't have a snazzy, shiny instruction book, so we want to annotate those sewing patterns. And as you know, I'm all about speeding up that process and making it so you don't have to play a memory test. So I have created a pattern cutting checklist. This you can find within all my courses, or you can get it from my Etsy store, and I'll pop the link below. So if you want to download that, speed up the process, you can. It's also really, really good as an organizer for your patterns. You can put it on the front of an envelope, put all your pattern pieces inside, and then this will tell you this is what this design is for. You'll know what fabrics, trimmings you want, how many pattern pieces, any notes for next time, and this will create a really good list of what pattern pieces you've got. So if you're missing any, you're going to know exactly what piece you are looking for. So let's go through this checklist to be able to add all of those instructions onto our patterns so they are going to make sense when we're sewing them up. So the first thing to do is add a pattern title, and you're going to find just writing front trouser or back trouser is not very helpful when you have made many patterns. So I like to put on what it is a bit more. So I've written flared front trouser for this, flared trouser waistband, and I'm just writing really quickly, so excuse the messy writing, but you get the hang of what I'm writing. So this is flared back trouser. Okay, so those are my names on there, and then the date. This is really, really handy if you create multiple different versions. So I think today's like the 22nd of January, maybe the 21st, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. So 22nd of 1st of 25. If you were doing this properly, you'd make sure everything on these patterns is super accurate. Okay, and then the size is the next thing we want on there. So size 8 for me, and this is half scale. Make sure you write on there half scale if you're doing it not in full scale, just so you remember. Size 8 half scale. And you can tick these things off on this checklist as you go as well, so you can start to check these off. The next thing is the number of pattern pieces and also that pattern piece number. So you literally just want to count up how many pattern pieces you've got. I've got 3 for this, so I'll literally go 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, and then what I could do if I was using this checklist is I would literally write pattern piece 1, that is my front, pattern piece 2, that's my waistband, this is my back, and then it would tell me what piece I'm missing if I couldn't find one of those pieces, so I know kind of what shape I'm looking for and what size. So we've done that next step, and then you want to write whether it's woven or stretch fabric, which it's for, because we use different blocks and different patterns for woven and stretch so that they're going to work for your body. If you created a stretch pattern in a woven fabric, you're going to find it's too small, and vice versa as a general rule of thumb. So we just write woven. And then the next thing we want to write on there is the seam allowance we have marked on. So 0.5 centimeter SA. And this is really, really good if you are tracing around your patterns for the future. Maybe you want to make another copy and then you don't have this line marked in there. You can literally just write 0.5 centimeters SA. It just means then people know what that seam allowance is to allow for when they're sewing things up. And then the next thing we want to do is mark on various different symbols. The first thing is our grain line. So what we want to make sure with our grain line is, unless it's a bias on the bias kind of piece of clothing, like a really floaty dress, then we want to make sure it's going up and down the body. So for this, I want the grain line to go up and down the body. So for the waistband, that also means the grain line wants to go up and down the body. So I'm going to use my 90-degree line it up with the center here, and just mark it so it goes up and down the body. And then what I'm going to do is use these reference lines that we've marked on to work out what the middle of up and down the body means, because I don't want the edge of this to be up and down the body. I want the very middle of this pattern, the grain line, to be up and down the body, which is why these reference lines that we marked on earlier are going to help us do that. So I'm just going to mark a little line there that goes in between that reference line, and now I can place my 90-degree there, and now I have my grain line, and I can do the same on the back piece. So just use those reference lines like so, mark a little line. Obviously if it was in pencil you could then rub it out again, line up that 90-degree line, and then mark on your grain line like so. And then we're going on to notches. Notches are so handy for matching things up. So like I said on the waistband, we can mark various different notches on this waistband so that we know where the center back seam's going to sit on this waistband. And we want to make sure these are brought all the way to the edge. At the moment, they're just at where the edge of the sewn fabric is, but when we cut it out, we need it right on the edge. So just bring those notches to the edge. And then I'm just going to do the center front one. You can do the side seam one as well, so they're all on there. So you're going to know exactly where this is going to match up when you are cutting this. And then notches in terms of on the main trouser pattern pieces are just the zip. So what you want to do is place your 90 degrees along the edge of the pattern and then just bring that notch out. And then we do the same on the other one. Place your 90 degrees along that line and then bring the notch out so it's on the edge of the pattern. So those are our notches. And then any fold lines. Now the only fold line we have is along that waistband. So if I'd done this in pencil, what I'd do is I'd literally grab my rubber and I'd go like this to turn it into a fold line. But because I haven't done it in pencil so that you can see it, then I can't do that. But I'm just going to write on here fold line. I could just do it in like a colored pen and just make it super clear. I mean, it would be in pencil anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but it would basically look like that if you'd done it in pencil but not in pink. So then that is my fold line. Then we just want to have a think whether there are any other annotations. So we just want to check through here, check, oh, we've done everything. Yep, grain line, notches, darts, fold line, and then any other annotations. So any gathers, anything else that would be really, really helpful to note on this pattern so that we have the full instructions to be able to sew it up. But I think for us, this is everything we need to have on there so that we can then sew this up. So don't forget, if you've not already done so, cut around here, cut around all your pattern pieces, so then you can cut it out of fabric and to create the cutest little toiles of these trousers. And then if you decide to do it in full scale, all you'll need to do is double any measurements we've done, double any hems, seam allowances, zip lengths, waistband sizes, so that then it will translate into the full scale. And if you do decide to create a little toile of your patterns, you're going to end up having something so cute like this. And if you decide actually you don't want them as flared and you only decide to close up one dart on the back and close up that one on the front, not adding in extra volume, then you're gonna have a little pair that looks like this. I just love them. They're so, so adorable. And this is also a really good way to test the balance of things, test like how wide a waistband does look in reality. Like, does it look too chunky? Does it look too narrow? So toiles and half scale toiles are a really, really good way to really get an idea of how your patterns are gonna look in the end. It has been an absolute pleasure having you here today, and if you love this tutorial and you want to create another sewing pattern right away, then I have another tutorial very similar to this where I show you how to create a top and a dress as well. So you're not just going to create one sewing pattern, but you're going to be able to create two different garments with hacking this pattern that you have created. Now, you already know what tools you need, so you can skip to the part where I show you how to get clear on your design so you understand what design we're creating in that video, and then you'll go on to create that to-do list and create your pattern as well. But if you're like, no, Sarah, I want to know everything to be able to create any top, shirt, jumpsuit, play suit, skirt, shorts, pair of trousers, whatever clothing idea you can dream up, then Design Confidence, my in-depth program to creating your own sewing patterns, is the place to be. This is where I show you all the drafting techniques. Think how to make cuffs, how to draft a button stand, how to draft a collar, how to draft plackets, all the different techniques so that you can combine everything together to create your sewing patterns for those dream clothes. And like I said at the beginning of this tutorial, you're not just going to learn the how, you're going to learn the why behind what you're doing as well. So it really is possible for you to be able to create those clothing ideas of your dreams. I'll pop the link for this below so you can check out more details around this. And of course, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments, drop them in my DMs, or send me over an email, whatever method works best for you. And if you have any requests of tutorials as well, let me know. I always love to hear from you. I always love to hear what you are wanting to turn into reality as well, so I can really support you in making those dream clothes. But for now, a huge thank you for today. If you love this tutorial, give it a like. If you want to see more things like this, then subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will see you in another video.